I'm Alex Parker. I'm 36 years old, and my own family tried to humiliate me by giving me a converted storage closet to sleep in at our family reunion, not knowing I owned the entire five-star resort. Before I tell you how that ended with their downfall and a shocking revelation from my grandmother's will, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how far these stories travel. My story doesn't start in that dusty, windowless room with the smell of decay. It starts a week earlier, 40 floors above the city in a sterile, glass-walled boardroom that might as well have been on another planet. The air was so thick with tension you could have cut it with a knife. On the giant, wall-mounted screen in front of me, 3 faces stared back, their expressions carved from granite. These were the corporate raiders, the sharks who had been circling my company, Parker Hospitality, for months. They saw the 8 years of my life's work as a tasty meal, nothing more. "The offer is final, Alex," said the lead shark, a man named Sterling. His voice was a low, bored monotone, a sound designed to communicate absolute power. "Our bid is generous. The shareholders will see that. We go public with the offer next week. So, unless you've miraculously found a white knight in your back pocket, this conversation is over." My jaw ached from clenching it. Every hotel, every employee, every guest experience I had meticulously crafted. He spoke of it all as if it were just numbers on a page. I had built this company from a single, dilapidated roadside inn into a brand synonymous with quality and care. It was my baby, and these men were threatening to tear it apart and sell it for scrap. I needed to be a ghost for the next 10 days. My lawyers were clear. Any unusual activity, any large transactions, any public attention could be twisted by Sterling's team and used to spook the board. I needed to be boring. I needed to be invisible. That's when my phone, lying face down on the polished mahogany, buzzed. A sharp, insistent vibration against the wood. A distraction I couldn't afford. I ignored it. Sterling's thin lips curved into a semblance of a smile. "Something more important, Parker?" With a sigh, I flipped the phone over. The screen lit up with a message from my younger brother, James. It was a picture of a breathtaking mountain resort, all majestic timber beams and enormous windows reflecting a sapphire blue sky. The caption, in our family group chat, was nauseatingly triumphant. "Hey everyone, big news! My promotion came with a massive bonus, so I'm treating the whole family to a week at the newly renovated Eagles Peak Lodge, the most exclusive 5-star spot in the region. I'll take care of everything. Get ready to be spoiled." My stomach tightened. Before I could even process the image, a second message, a private one just for me, appeared below it. "Hey bro, know things are tight for you. Don't worry about the cost. I've got you covered. Just try to pack something decent to wear. Okay? It's a classy place." I stared at the words, and the familiar, cold knot of resentment twisted in my gut. It was the same condescending, pitying tone he'd used my entire life. The golden child, magnanimously tossing a few crumbs to his older, struggling brother. The sheer irony of it all was staggering. Eagles Peak Lodge. I had to physically restrain myself from laughing out loud. The resort had been rebranded 2 months ago. Taking a slow, deliberate breath, I forced my features into a neutral mask and looked back at the screen. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice impossibly calm, "a family matter has come up that requires my attention. I will need a few days." Sterling shrugged, a dismissive gesture. "Take your time. We're not going anywhere. The clock is ticking, Parker." The call ended, plunging the boardroom into an unnerving silence. It was just me, the city skyline, and 2 colliding worlds. On one hand, a corporate battle for the soul of my company. On the other, a family reunion designed to highlight my perceived failures. And at the center of it all was the Sapphire Summit, my latest acquisition, the crown jewel of my empire, the very place my brother had chosen to humiliate me. A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had just been handed a loaded gun in the middle of a knife fight. I picked up my phone and dialed my right-hand man, my most trusted general manager, Marcus. "Marcus," I said, my voice low and steady. They're coming. A weary sigh came from the other end. Alex, are you sure about this? Now, with the Sterling situation, it's too risky. It's the perfect cover, Marcus, I countered, the plan crystallizing in my mind. I need to be invisible for a week. What's more invisible than Alex Parker, the disappointing hotel manager, on a family trip paid for by his rich younger brother? Sterling's investigators will never even look at me. I paused, my mind flashing to an old promise. And besides, there's something I have to do, something personal. Just make sure the rebranding isn't public knowledge yet. As far as anyone outside the company is concerned, we're still Eagles Peak Lodge. And James's arrangements? Marcus asked, a distinct note of distaste in his voice. I leaned back, the cold smile returning. Whatever he asks for, Marcus, give it to him. Let him build his own stage. I want him to be standing right in the center of it when the lights come on. To understand why I'd willingly walk into a lion's den dressed as a lamb, you need to understand that my entire life had been shaped by a ghost. A loving, wonderful ghost. My grandmother, Eleanor. She was the only person in my family who ever looked at me and didn't see a problem to be fixed. My childhood home was a shrine to my brother, James. His debate trophies lined the mantelpiece. His honor roll certificates were framed on the wall. His acceptance letter to a top-tier law school was treated like a sacred text. My parents, Mark and Emma, weren't cruel people. They were just narrow-minded. They had a blueprint for success, and James fit it perfectly. I, with my quiet nature and my strange fascination with how things worked, how a hotel lobby could make a weary traveler feel instantly at home, how the right service could turn a bad day into a good one, was an unsolvable equation. Alex, your father and I are worried, my mother would say, wringing her hands, after I announced I was taking a job at a hotel instead of applying for a business degree. It's not a real career. Service. What kind of future is that? My father was more blunt. For God's sake, Alex, stop playing games and be more like your brother. James has a plan. He's going to have a promotion before he's 30. You're going to be changing bed sheets. But Grandma Eleanor, she got it. She'd sit with me on her porch swing, the air thick with the smell of roses from her garden, and she'd listen. She'd listen to my dreams of creating not just buildings, but experiences. There is honor in service, Alex, she told me, her hand, wrinkled and warm, covering mine. Making a person feel seen and cared for is one of the most important jobs in the world. Don't you ever let them make you feel small for wanting to do that. The summer I turned 22, she was fading. Cancer had stolen her energy, but it couldn't touch the light in her eyes. The last time I saw her, she called me to her bedside. The room smelled of old books and lavender, a scent I will forever associate with unconditional love. She pushed a small, dark cherry wood box into my hands. It was old, intricately carved, and surprisingly heavy. This is your inheritance, my dear boy, she whispered, her voice a fragile thread of sound. It's not a fortune. Your parents will handle the stocks and the property. They believe in what they can count. I believe in what I can feel. And I feel you are destined for great things. I tried to object, tears welling in my eyes. Grandma, I don't need. Hush now. She put a finger to my lips. Inside you'll find some money. Enough to plant a seed. But more important, there is a letter. It is sealed. Her gaze locked onto mine, fierce and clear. You will not open this letter until two conditions are met. Promise me, Alex, this is my last wish. Anything, Grandma. First, she said, her breath catching. You must feel, deep in your soul, that you have truly built a home for others. Something real, something that is yours, something you are proud of. Not for anyone else, but for you. And second, I asked, my voice thick, you must open it in the presence of the whole family. Mark, Emma, James, all of them. They need to be there. They need to hear it. Why? I asked, confused. Why do they have to be there? A sad, knowing smile touched her lips. Because, my dear Alex, they listen with their eyes. They need to see your success before they can hear the truth. It's the only way. Promise me. I promise, Grandma, I vowed, clutching the box to my chest. Felt like I was holding her very heart. She passed away 2 days later. The funeral was a somber affair. My father clapped me on the back with awkward sympathy. She was always very fond of you, he said, as if it were a curious puzzle. Across the room, James was already deep in conversation with our Uncle Richard, a high-powered corporate lawyer, discussing potential summer internships. I stood alone, the weight of my promise settling deep into my bones. That inheritance became my secret weapon. It wasn't just money. It was a mandate. It was my grandmother's faith made tangible. While James was taking out student loans and living the high life at law school, I was living a double life. By day, I was a valet, learning the names of wealthy patrons and the feel of a luxury car. By night, I was a night auditor at a grimy, rundown motel on the edge of town, learning how to balance books, handle drunk and disorderly guests, and fix a leaking faucet at 3 a.m. with a wrench and a prayer. I absorbed every facet of the business, from the plumbing to the profit and loss statements. It was at a tired, historic hotel in the city that I met Marcus. He was the general manager, a grizzled, cynical veteran of the industry who had seen it all and was counting the days to his retirement. I was just a kid at the front desk, but I saw the hotel's faded glory and its potential. I relentlessly pestered him with ideas, a new marketing plan, a guest loyalty program, a partnership with a local brewery. I left detailed notes and proposals on his desk. One night, he found me in the back office long after my shift had ended, sketching out a redesign for the lobby on a stack of napkins. He stood there in silence for a full minute, just watching me. Finally, he spoke. "You're not just here to collect a paycheck, are you, kid?" That was the beginning of the most important professional relationship of my life. He took me under his wing. He taught me about financing, about managing union staff, about navigating city permits, about the 1,000 invisible details that elevate a hotel from a place to sleep to a destination. He was the mentor I never knew I needed. When I finally felt ready, I took my grandmother's seed money and my own meager savings and did something crazy. I bought a failing 20-room motor in that was on the brink of foreclosure. It was a money pit. The roof leaked, the wiring was a fire hazard, and its reputation was garbage. The first year was brutal. I nearly lost everything. I remember one specific week in February. A brutal cold snap hit, and a pipe burst in the main wing, flooding 4 rooms. The ancient boiler gave up the ghost at the same time. We had a full house of guests, mostly truckers and traveling salesmen, shivering in their rooms. The plumber wanted a $2,000 emergency fee, cash up front. I had about $500 in the bank. I was standing in ankle-deep, freezing water at 2 in the morning, thinking, this is it. I'm done. I failed her. I called Marcus, my voice shaking with cold and failure. "I can't do this, Marcus. I'm in over my head. I'm going to have to declare bankruptcy." There was a pause on the other end. Then his gruff voice snapped me out of my self-pity. "So declare bankruptcy, or don't. Is this the first pipe that's ever burst in the history of hotels? Is this the first time it's been cold? You told me you had a vision for this place. You think a vision is afraid of a little water? Go to the hardware store, buy every space heater they have. Go to the diner down the street, buy coffee and donuts for all your guests. Apologize to them personally, and then call that plumber and offer him a payment plan or a trade or something. Stop being a victim and start being a manager. Damn it." His words were like a slap in the face. He was right. I spent the next 48 hours without sleep. I moved guests around. I handed out blankets. I poured endless cups of coffee. I negotiated a deal with the plumber. I didn't just save the hotel. I earned the loyalty of my guests and my tiny staff. That crisis was my crucible. It took 2 years of that kind of relentless, soul-crushing, and ultimately exhilarating work. But we turned that motor into the Willow, a chic, highly rated boutique hotel. The profits from the Willow bought my second hotel. The second bought the third and fourth. Over the next 8 years, I quietly built Parker Hospitality. I never sought investors. I poured every dime of profit back into the business. I met Olivia when she was the brilliant, up-and-coming designer I hired to renovate the lobby of my third property. Our connection was immediate, a shared language of aesthetics and purpose. We fell in love over blueprints and fabric swatches. She became the creative soul of my brand and the anchor of my life. Through it all, I kept my growing success a secret from my family. I never wanted their praise if it was tainted by the knowledge of my wealth. But more than that, I was waiting for the right moment, the right place, to fulfill my grandmother's last wish. Which brought me back to the present. The hostile takeover attempt by Sterling was a direct threat to everything I had built. My legal team's advice was absolute. Lay low. Be the boring, unimportant man your family thinks you are, my lawyer had said, ironically. I explained the impossible convergence of events to Olivia as we sat on the balcony of our apartment, the city lights twinkling below. Are you absolutely certain about this, Alex? She asked, her brow furrowed with genuine worry. You're walking into an ambush. You know what they're like. And with the Sterling deal at its most critical point, it seems like madness. It's calculated madness, I assured her, taking her hand. It's the perfect cover. No one would ever suspect the down-on-his-luck older brother at a family reunion of being the CEO orchestrating a multi-million-dollar defense against a takeover. It gets me off the grid. I squeezed her hand. And Liv, it's at the Sapphire Summit. It's a sign. It's the one chance I might ever have to get them all in one place to see what I've built. To finally open that letter. She sighed, a soft sound of resignation. She understood the weight of that promise. Okay, she said, but you call me if it gets to be too much. Don't let them break you. They can't break what they don't understand, I said. This time I wasn't just going to endure. I was going to direct. The stage was being set, and I knew my lines perfectly. My brother, James, orchestrated his grand plan with the smug satisfaction of a chess player who believes he's 3 moves ahead of an amateur. In his mind, the family reunion wasn't just a vacation. It was a carefully constructed theater piece, and he was the writer, director, and star. The theme? His glorious success juxtaposed with my quiet, persistent failure. His first act of stagecraft involved my accommodations. Giving me the cheapest room wasn't subtle enough. He wanted to author a special kind of misery, a personal insult wrapped in a package of feigned thoughtfulness. I saw the whole sordid affair unfold later, thanks to the meticulously kept digital records of our new management system. James hadn't used the website. He had called the resort's main reservation line, getting a junior agent named Kevin on the phone. From the call recording, I could hear the practiced, syrupy charm in James's voice. Hi there, Kevin. My name is James Parker. I'm booking a large family trip, several of your top suites, in fact. He paused, letting that sink in. Now, I have a slightly unusual request for my older brother. He's a very simple man, you see, very down-to-earth. All this fanciness, he said the word like it was distasteful. It would just make him uncomfortable. He's much happier in something more traditional, rustic even. I see, sir, Kevin replied, his voice young and eager to please. We have some lovely classic rooms with a forest view. No, that's still too much, James interrupted smoothly. I was looking at an old resort map online, back when it was Eagles Peak, and I saw some rooms marked as Heritage Wings down by the service entrance. They're probably not on your main booking list, but it would be perfect for him. It would make him feel so much more at home, you know? This was the masterstroke. He was inventing a category, giving it a charming name, and framing it as a favor to me. Sir, I'm not seeing any heritage rooms in our system, Kevin said, confused. Then James dangled the bait. Look, Kevin, I'm about to drop over $20,000 here. If you can make this little special arrangement happen for me, I'll make sure to personally hand you a very, very generous tip when I check out. Let's say $500? Cash. Just for being so helpful. For a young man making maybe $15 an hour, $500 was a fortune. It was a month of groceries. It was a car payment. I could hear the hesitation, then the capitulation in Kevin's voice. Let me see what I can do, sir. Kevin had manually overridden the system. He'd found a room designation used for internal purposes, S117, a storage closet for old furniture and seasonal decorations, and assigned it to me, creating a new, fake booking category, Heritage Room. James had successfully bribed an employee to sentence me to a week in a closet, and he had the digital paper trail to prove it. The part he didn't count on was our brand new, top-of-the-line management software. It was programmed to flag exactly this kind of anomaly. The moment Kevin confirmed the manual override, a silent red alert flashed on the dashboard of my general manager, Marcus. Marcus was on the phone to me within minutes. His voice was a low growl of controlled fury. "You are not going to believe the audacity of this little punk, Alex. He's not just sticking you in a bad room. He has actively bribed one of my staff to put you in a supply closet." I listened, my own anger a cold, hard stone in my chest. This was so much more pathetic than I could have imagined. This wasn't a prank. It was a calculated, malicious act. "And that's not the half of it," Marcus continued, his voice tight. "He put the deposit down for all the family's activities, the golf, the spa packages, the private wine tasting, on his American Express. I ran the card number through our system. Alex, the card has a $6,000 credit limit, and it's got less than $500 of available credit on it. There is no possible way it will cover the final bill. It was all there. The house of cards, the desperate performance, the fake promotion, the frantic need to project an image of wealth he didn't have. He was a fraud, and he was about to make his own family the victims of his con." "What's the play, boss?" Marcus asked. "I can have security meet him in the lobby and escort him off the property for attempted fraud. I can fire Kevin right now." "No," I said, my decision instant and absolute. "You do nothing to Kevin. In fact, pull him into your office, explain that we know what happened and that he was put in an impossible position. Tell him his job is safe. Then, give him a paid week off effective immediately. Tell him we'll need a signed statement from him when he gets back. He's not the villain here, Marcus. He's our star witness. And James, let the reservation stand," I said, my voice hardening. "And document everything. I want a file on him that would choke a horse. I want every receipt he signs, every special request he makes, every recorded phone call. This isn't just family drama anymore. This is business." The day of the reunion arrived. I drove up the winding mountain road in my modest 4-year-old sedan, a deliberate choice. I watched as my father's gleaming Mercedes and my uncle's brand new BMW roared past me on the final stretch. I parked in the designated staff lot, a world away from the valet-attended guest entrance, and slipped in through a side door. I met Marcus in his back office, a room buzzing with the quiet efficiency of a well-run operation. He handed me 2 key cards. One was a plain white plastic card with S117 written on it in marker. The other was a heavy, black key card with the resort's new, elegant logo, the master key to the penthouse suite. "The stage is set," Marcus said, shaking his head. "I still think you're certifiably insane for doing this. The higher the climb, the harder the fall," I replied, pocketing both keys. Olivia arrived just as I was about to head out. She had driven up to wish me luck before heading back to the city for a crucial client dinner. She wouldn't be back until the final night. She wrapped her arms around me, her hug tight and fierce. "Remember who you are, Alex?" she whispered into my ear. "Don't let their noise drown out your own voice." I kissed her, drawing strength from her belief in me. "Don't worry," I said. "I'm the one with the microphone this time." I made my way to the grand lobby just as the Parker clan was descending in a wave of expensive luggage and loud voices. My father, Mark, gave me a cursory nod, his eyes flicking over my simple slacks and jacket with a familiar, faint air of disappointment. My mother, Emma, rushed over to give me a quick, airlight hug that felt more like a social obligation than a gesture of maternal affection. Then came James, the conquering hero, with his girlfriend, Melissa, attached to his arm like a designer handbag. Melissa was a vision of curated perfection, from her professionally blown-out hair to her immaculately manicured nails. Her smile was dazzling, but her eyes were sharp and constantly scanning, assessing the wealth around her. James beamed, radiating a smug, proprietary energy as if he'd personally carved the mountains outside. "There he is," James boomed, clapping me on the shoulder with enough force to make me stumble. "Glad you could make it, big brother. Don't worry, you're going to love this place." He swaggered up to the front desk, where a senior manager, who had been thoroughly briefed by Marcus, waited with a professional smile. James took the prepared key card packets and began his performance, distributing them like a benevolent monarch bestowing gifts upon his court. "Mom, Dad, you're in the panorama suite. The view is simply breathtaking," he announced with a flourish. "Uncle Richard, Aunt Victoria, you have the mountain view loft. Sophia, Nathan, you kids are gonna go nuts. Aunt Linda, Uncle Robert, you're in the garden suite, right by the spa, just like you wanted." Each announcement was met with a chorus of performative gasps and effusive thanks. My Uncle Richard, the lawyer, beamed. "You've outdone yourself, son. A real credit to the Parker name." My Aunt Victoria was already posting pictures to her Instagram, a look of sublime contentment on her face. Finally, with everyone else holding their luxurious suite keys, James turned to me. He held up a single, sad-looking white key card between his thumb and forefinger. He paused, milking the moment, ensuring every eye in the family was on us. A cruel, triumphant little smile played on his lips. "And Alex," he said, his voice ringing with false sympathy, "I got you the heritage room. It's all that was left in the budget after booking these amazing suites for everyone. But I'm sure you'll find it cozy." A few stifled snickers came from my cousins, Sophia and Nathan. My father just shook his head slowly, a deep, weary sigh escaping his lips, a sigh that said, "See, this is what I have to put up with." I stepped forward and took the key card from his hand. Our fingers brushed, and in that brief contact, I felt the desperate tremor in his hand. He needed this. He needed me to be small so he could feel big. I offered him a small, placid smile. "Thanks, James," I said, my voice quiet, yet carrying easily in the suddenly silent lobby. "I really appreciate you thinking of me." I turned and walked toward the corridor he had pointed to, the one that led away from the grand staircase and the guest elevators, the one that led toward the service areas. I could feel their collective gaze on my back, a potent cocktail of pity, amusement, and utter indifference. Let them watch, I thought, my hand closing around the cool, hard plastic of the keycard. Let them enjoy the show. They had no idea I had already rewritten the ending. The walk to my designated room was a journey through the resort's class system. The plush, patterned carpet that silenced footfalls in the main hall gave way to scuffed, utilitarian linoleum. The warm, artfully recessed lighting was replaced by long, buzzing fluorescent tubes that cast a cold, sterile glare. The air, which had been infused with the pleasant, subtle scent of cedar and cinnamon, now smelled sharply of industrial-grade cleaner and stale coffee. I found the door at the end of a long, featureless corridor, right next to a rumbling ice machine. The door wasn't solid oak like the guest rooms. It was thin metal, painted a drab beige. A small, stenciled label read, S-117. My heritage room. I swiped the cheap plastic keycard. The lock emitted a flat, electronic beep, and I pushed the door open. A wave of cool, musty air, thick with the smell of dust and disuse, washed over me. The room was a cell. It was smaller than the walk-in closet in my apartment. A lumpy, narrow single bed with a thin, scratchy-looking blanket was pushed against one wall. Next to it was a small, metal nightstand scarred with rust rings. A single, bare bulb dangled from a wire in the ceiling, casting stark, unflattering shadows. There was no window, no television, no chair. In the corner, a dark, sprawling patch of what was unmistakably black mold crept up the drywall. My view was a concrete wall. This wasn't just a bad room. It was an insult. It was a deliberate act of contempt. I took out my phone and, with a grim sense of purpose, documented everything. I took wide shots of the cramped space, close-ups of the mold, a picture of the rust-stained floor. This wasn't for sympathy. This was for the file. Evidence. I sent a text to Marcus. It's even worse than I imagined. He didn't just put me in a closet. He put me in a health code violation. Perfect. His reply was instantaneous, laced with his characteristic dry fury. The penthouse is clean, warm, and mold-free. The word is yours, Alex. I can have a health inspector here in an hour and have the entire family evicted. We can call it a gas leak. A small, grim smile touched my lips. The thought was tempting, a quick and satisfying end to the charade. But it was too easy. It wouldn't teach them anything. Patience, my friend. I texted back. The best revenge is a dish best served publicly. Let them enjoy their dinner. I'll see you in the security office in 10. I dropped my duffel bag, containing nothing more than a change of clothes, on the floor and left, locking the miserable little room behind me. I had a few hours before the grand welcome dinner James was hosting in my honor, or rather, in honor of his own generosity. I spent that time with Marcus in the resort's state-of-the-art security office. It was a cavern of monitors displaying feeds from every public area of the hotel. We sat at a console, and he walked me through the file he was compiling. It was already thick. The call recording of James bribing Kevin. The credit card statements showing his mountain of debt. The internal logs of his outrageous requests. He was building his own cage bar by bar. That evening, we all gathered at the Summit, the resort's signature fine dining restaurant. It was a stunning space, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a 180-degree view of the sun setting over the jagged mountain peaks. James had, of course, secured the best table, a large semicircular booth right against the glass. He sat at its center, playing the role of the gracious host with Melissa, his perfectly polished girlfriend, hanging on his every word. She was showing off a new diamond bracelet, a bauble he'd clearly given her upon arrival to set the tone. The conversation, as I had predicted, was an ode to James. The partners at the firm are already talking about my next promotion, James announced loudly, swirling a glass of obscenely expensive Cabernet he'd ordered. The salary from this last jump was, frankly, insane. But the next one, we're talking about a whole new stratosphere. Life-changing money. My father, Mark, beamed with a pride so intense it was almost painful to watch. "That's my boy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "A sharp mind and a killer instinct. That's the Parker way." He shot a fleeting glance my way, a silent but powerful indictment of my own perceived lack of ambition. Aunt Victoria, my mother's sister and a woman who valued appearances above all else, leaned forward, her own diamonds glittering. "Oh, James, it's just marvelous. You simply must tell us, what's a deal of your size even look like? Is it terribly stressful?" As James launched into a wildly embellished, completely fabricated tale about a hostile takeover he had supposedly orchestrated, my cousin Sophia, Victoria's daughter and a perfect echo of her mother, turned to me. Her voice was syrupy sweet, but her eyes held a glint of malice. "So, Alex, what about you? Still playing hotel manager somewhere? I can't imagine the tips are very good compared to all this." She gestured vaguely at the opulent room, the attentive waiters, the expensive wine. Before I could formulate a reply, James cut in with a hearty laugh. "Don't worry about old Alex. He's happy in his little world. He likes things simple. Right, bro?" I just smiled, a calm, unreadable mask. I took a slow sip of water, letting the moment hang. Then, I decided it was time to plant the first seed of doubt. "Actually, the hotel business is more interesting than you'd think," I said, my tone light and conversational. I looked across the table at my Uncle Richard. "There's a lot of movement in the market right now. Big acquisitions, high-stakes deals. For instance," I leaned forward slightly, "I heard a rumor on an industry chat board that this very place, Eagles Peak, was part of a major portfolio sale recently. A quiet deal, very hush-hush. Did you hear anything about that, Uncle Richard? Your firm handles corporate law, right? You must hear whispers." My uncle, the lawyer, paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. He was a man who prided himself on being informed. "Can't say that I have," he said, a slight frown creasing his brow. I don't really follow the hospitality sector. It's a bit niche, but I could see the wheels turning. I had introduced a piece of information he didn't possess. I had spoken his language, the language of deals and acquisitions. He was intrigued and slightly annoyed. My cousin Rachel, Aunt Linda's daughter, was the only one who seemed to notice the subtle shift in dynamics. She was a thoughtful, observant young woman, and she gave me a small, questioning smile from across the table. The conversation quickly swirled back to James's glorious career, but the seed was planted. The next day brought the next level of humiliation. James had arranged a morning of golf on the resort's private, championship-level course for the men, and a lavish spa afternoon for the women. My name, conspicuously, was absent from both lists. I found the group gathering in the lobby, dressed in expensive golf attire. I approached James, feigning confusion. "Hey, what time are we teeing off?" He put on a masterful performance of pained apology, making sure our parents were within earshot. "Oh man, Alex, I am so sorry. Completely slipped my mind to ask you. It's just—" He lowered his voice to a confidential whisper that was still perfectly audible to everyone. "The Greens' fees are insane here, like $300 a person. I didn't want to put you in an awkward position, with your finances." Melissa, his girlfriend, delivered the finishing blow, her eyes scanning my simple polo shirt and chinos with disdain. "And they have a very strict dress code at the clubhouse. You really need the proper gear to even get past the front door." It was a perfectly coordinated attack, designed to paint me as both poor and classless. Rachel, who had just come down the stairs, overheard the exchange, and her face flushed with anger. "That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I'm not going to the spa if Alex can't go golfing. It's a family vacation." I appreciated her loyalty more than she could ever know. I walked over and put a gentle hand on her arm. "It's okay, Rachel. Honestly, it's a beautiful day. I think I'll just go for a hike. Besides, I have some work calls I need to make anyway. You go have fun. We'll catch up later." She looked conflicted, but she allowed her mother, Linda, to steer her toward the spa entrance. As the rest of them trooped out toward the golf club shuttle, laughing and joking, leaving me standing alone in the cavernous lobby, I felt that old, familiar pang of exclusion. But this time it didn't linger. It wasn't a wound. It was fuel. This was the last straw. The final, carefully documented insult. They had made their choices clear as day. Now it was time for me to make mine. The game was over. The reckoning was about to begin. That evening, after the family returned from their day of exclusive leisure, flushed with sun and self-satisfaction, I sent a simple message to the family group chat. "Hope everyone had a great day. To celebrate our reunion, I've taken the liberty of arranging a private dinner for us tonight. 8 p.m. The Obsidian Room. My treat." The responses were a perfect encapsulation of my family's dynamics. My mother replied instantly with a string of heart emojis. "Oh, Alex, that's so thoughtful of you. What a wonderful surprise." My Aunt Victoria sent, "The Obsidian Room? I've heard it's impossible to get. How exciting." And then came the message from James, dripping with the condescension he couldn't resist. "Wow, big spender. You sure you can swing that, bro? Those private rooms are pricey. But hey, your call. Don't be late." He had no idea. The Obsidian Room wasn't just a private dining room. It was my private dining room. It was an unlisted space, reserved for my most important business partners and sensitive negotiations. It was soundproof, equipped with a state-of-the-art, hidden presentation screen, and boasted a secluded balcony with the most breathtaking, unobstructed view of the entire valley. It was my inner sanctum, and tonight it would be their courtroom. I was there first, waiting for them. I had shed the skin of Alex, the disappointing manager. I was dressed in a custom-tailored navy suit, sharp and understated, a suit that cost more than my first car. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, not looking at the stunning view, but at the reflection of the room in the glass. On the center of the long, polished obsidian table, Marcus had placed a single object, the heavy cherry wood box my grandmother had given me so long ago. They arrived in a cacophony of chatter, still buzzing from their day. They fell silent the moment they stepped through the door. The sheer, understated opulence of the room. The dark, rich wood, the soaring ceilings, the single, dramatic piece of art on the wall. It was on a completely different plane from the public restaurant. It radiated power. "Wow, Alex," my father said, his voice holding a note of genuine, grudging respect for the first time all week. "How on earth did you manage to book this?" His eyes scanned the room, trying to calculate its cost. "I have my ways," I said calmly, my voice even. I gestured for them to sit. They took their seats, a new, uncertain energy settling over them. James, out of habit, moved to take the seat at the head of the table, but I was already standing there. He stopped, confused, and took a seat to the side. For the first time, he wasn't in the center of gravity. He tried to recover with a forced laugh. "So, what's the occasion, Alex? Did you win the lottery or something?" "Something like that," I said, my voice cool. I remained standing. "Before we order, there are a few family matters I'd like to discuss. A bit of accounting." The mood in the room dropped several degrees. My casual invitation had just turned into a formal deposition. "First," I said, and I gave a subtle nod to a senior staff member, a trusted manager named David, who was standing discreetly by the door. David stepped forward with the polished grace of a seasoned professional and placed a thick, leather-bound bill folder in front of James. "This is the preliminary bill for the family's stay and all associated activities thus far." James opened it. His smug expression vanished, replaced by a blotchy, red-faced confusion. "What is this? This is outrageous. These prices are all wrong. I was quoted a 40% discount," he sputtered, his voice rising. "There is no discount," I stated flatly. The words landed like stones in the silent room. "The family and friends discount at our properties is a courtesy. It is extended to guests who treat our establishments and, more importantly, our staff with a baseline of respect. That courtesy was voided the moment you bribed an employee." "You can't do that," he exclaimed, looking around the table for support. "Who the hell do you think you are to make that decision?" "I'm getting to that," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I pressed a small, almost invisible button on the side of the table. With a faint whir, the large, abstract painting on the far wall retracted upwards, revealing a perfectly integrated 8K resolution screen. "But first, let's review your special booking arrangement for me." On the screen, a video began to play. It was crystal clear security footage of the resort's lobby reservation desk. The time and date were stamped in the corner. The video showed James, his face perfectly visible, leaning conspiratorially toward the young agent, Kevin. It showed him smiling, charming, and then surreptitiously sliding a thick wad of cash across the counter. The audio, enhanced by our security system, was shockingly clear. "Make sure it's the worst one you've got. Something rustic. I'll make it worth your while." A very, very generous tip. A collective, sharp intake of breath filled the room. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Aunt Victoria looked pale. Uncle Richard, the lawyer, stared at the screen as if he were looking at evidence in a capital case, his face a mask of disbelief and professional disgust. James looked like he had been physically struck. "And then," I continued, my voice relentless, "there is the matter of payment for this rather large, non-discounted bill." I nodded to David again. He stepped forward and placed a small, printed slip of paper next to the bill folder in front of James. "This is the status of the credit card you put on file. It was declined this afternoon when we ran the standard pre-authorization for the final amount. It seems you don't have the funds to cover this. It would also appear that your talk of a major promotion and a massive salary was a complete fabrication. That was the final, fatal blow. It was one thing to be cruel. It was another to be a liar and a fraud." Melissa, his girlfriend, who had been watching this all unfold with a look of growing horror, finally snapped. She stared at James, her beautiful face twisted into a snarl of pure fury and humiliation. "You lied to me?" she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. The bracelet? This trip? Your new job? All of it was a lie. James just stammered, his face ashen, unable to form a single word of defense. I was going to ask everyone to chip in. I just needed. She didn't wait for him to finish. With a gesture of absolute contempt, she stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the polished stone floor. She wrenched the expensive diamond bracelet from her wrist and threw it on the table. It skittered across the obsidian surface and came to a stop in front of James's plate. "We're done," she spat. She turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, the slam of the heavy door echoing her disgust. In the stunned silence that followed, James stared at the bracelet, then at me, his eyes wild with a desperate, cornered animal hatred. "Who are you?" he finally choked out, the words tearing from his throat. "How did you do this? How did you get all of this? You're a nobody. You're a pathetic, washed-up hotel manager." The door to the dining room opened again, softly this time. It wasn't a staff member. It was Olivia. She looked breathtaking, dressed in a sharp, elegant power suit, her presence commanding the room's attention instantly. She walked directly to my side, her heels clicking softly on the floor, and placed her hand on my arm, a simple gesture of solidarity and ownership. "He's not a manager," she said, her voice clear and cool, cutting through the thick, toxic air. She let her gaze sweep across the table, lingering for a moment on my Uncle Richard. "You're a corporate lawyer, aren't you, Richard? You must follow the market. Surely you heard of the quiet, off-market acquisition of the entire Eagles Peak portfolio 6 months ago." I saw the blood drain from my uncle's face as the final impossible puzzle piece slammed into place in his mind. Olivia smiled, a slight, dangerous curve of her lips. "Allow me to reintroduce my fiancé. This is Alex Parker, the founder and CEO of the Parker Hospitality Group." She gestured elegantly around the magnificent room. "And I'm Olivia Chun, his Chief Design Officer. On behalf of our entire team, I'd like to welcome you all to our newest flagship property, the Sapphire Summit." A wave of pure, unadulterated shock, so profound it was utterly silent, washed over my family. My father looked as if he'd seen a ghost. My mother's quiet weeping had turned into ragged, audible sobs. James just stared, his mouth hanging agape, his entire world, the one he had built on a foundation of lies and arrogance, shattering into a million pieces around him. I let the silence stretch, letting the weight of the truth settle on them. Then, I placed both of my hands on the old, dark cherry wood box my grandmother had given me. "And now," I said, my voice quiet, but carrying the weight of a decade of struggle, of promise, and of pain. "Now that we are all here, and you all finally see what I have built, it's time to keep my promise to her." The air in the obsidian room was heavy and thick, charged with the static of shattered illusions. My family sat frozen, a tableau of disbelief. My father, Mark, a man who had always been so sure of his world, so certain of the hierarchy within it, looked utterly lost. His golden boy was a fraud, and his forgotten son was a king. The cognitive dissonance was a physical blow, leaving him slumped and gray-faced in his chair. My mother's sobs were the only sound, a heartbreaking soundtrack to the demolition of her life's narrative. James was a hollowed-out shell, his gaze fixed on the diamond bracelet on the table, a glittering symbol of his spectacular self-destruction. Just as it felt the silence would become permanent, the door opened one last time. A man in a conservative, impeccably tailored suit walked in. He was in his late 60s, with a mane of distinguished silver hair and an air of quiet, unshakable authority. It was Mr. Harrison, my grandmother's longtime estate lawyer, a man my father and uncle had always treated with a mixture of respect and professional deference. "Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice steady. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." "Alex," he replied, his gaze sweeping over the wreckage at the table before landing on me with a look of understanding. "I see the proceedings have begun." His arrival, his familiar authority, finally broke the spell. My father found his voice, though it was a weak, reedy version of its usual confident baritone. "Harrison? What in God's name is going on? What are you doing here?" "I am here at Alex's request," Mr. Harrison said, his tone formal and precise. "I am here, Mark, to fulfill the final, unexecuted stipulation of your mother's will." He walked to the table and stood beside me, a silent, powerful ally. I looked down at the cherry wood box. For so long, it had been a symbol of a secret burden, a promise I feared I might never be able to keep. Now it felt light in my hands, felt like freedom. My fingers, steady now, found the small, tarnished brass latch. I lifted the lid. The rich, sweet scent of old cedar and aging paper filled the air around me. Inside, resting on a bed of faded blue velvet, was a single envelope, yellowed with age. My name was written on the front in my grandmother's familiar, elegant looping script. My Uncle Richard, ever the pragmatist, mustered a scoff, though it lacked its usual punch. Her final stipulation? What are you talking about, Harrison? Her estate was settled years ago. The bulk of it was divided between her children, as it should have been. Alex received a token inheritance, a hobby fund. "That is not entirely accurate, Richard," Mr. Harrison said, his voice cutting and precise. "Eleanor was a very specific woman. She structured her will in two parts. The disposition of her primary assets was indeed executed. But the second part, what she referred to as her legacy investment, was contingent upon this very event." I picked up the envelope. The paper was so brittle I feared it might crumble in my hands. With the utmost care, I broke the wax seal, a seal that had been untouched for 14 years. Inside was a single sheet of heavy cream-colored paper, folded once. I unfolded it and began to read my grandmother's final words aloud. "My dearest Alex," I began, my voice clear and strong. "If you are reading this, then you have done it. You have built your home. In my heart, I never doubted you for a moment. I am writing this letter because I know my family. I know their hearts, and I know their blind spots. And I know they will not understand my decision to give you that seed, that small push to start your journey. They see the world in terms of success and failure, of balance sheets and job titles. I have always seen the world in terms of character." I paused and let my eyes drift to my father. His face was a mask of stone. "To my children, Mark and Linda," I continued, the words a posthumous rebuke. "I love you both dearly, but somewhere along the way you were blinded by the sparkle of what is easy, of what is praised by the world. You celebrated James for his grades, his intellect, his ambition. These things are not vices, but they are hollow shells without a foundation of kindness and humility. Time and time again, I watched you overlook Alex. I watched you dismiss his quiet strength, his deep empathy, his stubborn resilience. You saw a dreamer and you were afraid for him. I saw a builder, and I was proud of him. And to James," I paused again, my gaze finding my brother's. He flinched as if I had physically struck him. "My dear grandson, I worry for you. Your confidence is a house built on sand. You seek validation from others because you have not yet learned how to build it within yourself. You confuse arrogance with strength. I fear that this path will lead you to a lonely place. It is my deepest hope that, by the time Alex reads this letter, you will have begun to learn the profound difference between earning respect and demanding it. The money I left Alex was not an inheritance in the traditional sense." I read, the final lines resonating with the truth I had always felt but never been able to articulate. It was an investment in character, an investment in the kind of man I knew he would become. A man who understands that true wealth is not what you possess, but what you create, and how you treat the people who help you create it. I hope, now, with the evidence of his heart and his hard work before you, you can all finally see what I saw so clearly from the very beginning. Be proud of the man you have become, Alex. Your house has many rooms, and your heart has room for all of them. You have made your old grandmother very, very happy. With all of my love, for all of time, Eleanor. I folded the letter. A single tear escaped and traced a hot path down my cheek, but it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of release. The validation I had spent my entire adult life subconsciously chasing hadn't come from the billions my company was worth, or the beautiful hotels, or the stunned faces of my family. Came from this piece of paper. From her belief in me. It was a shield. It was a key. It was everything. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't shocked. It was funereal. Mr. Harrison broke it, his tone shifting from sentimental to clinical. He turned his attention to James, who looked small and broken. James, as your grandmother's letter so presciently noted, your actions have led you to a difficult place. We have several serious legal issues to discuss. The first is the matter of your outstanding and substantial bill with this establishment. The second, and far more serious, is the clear evidence of employee bribery and attempted credit card fraud. He let the word fraud hang in the air like a guillotine. Under state law, Mr. Harrison continued, his voice dispassionate, Alex and the Parker Hospitality Group have every right to press criminal charges. Given the documented evidence, a conviction would be highly likely. That would be a very public, very permanent, and very damaging event for you, and by extension, for the entire Parker family name. James finally looked up, his face a mess of raw terror and abject shame. No, please, Alex, don't, he whispered, the words barely audible. I looked at my brother, the golden child, and I felt nothing. Not hatred, not anger, not even satisfaction. Just a vast, empty pity. He wasn't a villain. He was just a weak, deeply insecure man who had been suffocated by the expectations he'd tried so desperately to uphold. I'm not going to send you to jail, James, I said, my voice quiet. But this ends now. All of it. There are consequences. Real-world consequences. I looked at Mr. Harrison, my voice firm. I believe James has some assets. Condo, a car, a small stock portfolio. He will liquidate all of them immediately. The proceeds will be used to pay his bill to this hotel in full and to create a compensation fund for the employees he put at risk. The remainder, if any, will be placed in a managed trust. He can access that trust only after he has held a steady, honest job, verified by tax returns, for 1 full calendar year. It wasn't a punishment designed to humiliate him further. It was a structured path back to reality. It was the harshest and kindest thing I could possibly do for him. He would have to start over from zero with nothing but himself. He would have to build his own home from the foundation up. The months that followed that explosive night at Sapphire Summit were defined not by noise, but by its absence. The constant, grating static of my family's judgment, the background radiation of my entire life, had been switched off. The resulting silence was vast, unnerving, and ultimately wonderfully peaceful. The storm had passed, and now I had to learn to live in the quiet, irrevocably altered landscape it had left behind. The first person to reach across the new divide was my mother, Emma. She called about 2 weeks after the reunion. I saw her name on my phone screen and braced myself for accusations or tears, but her voice, when she spoke, was small and hesitant, stripped of its usual social certainty. It was the first time she had ever called me just to talk. Alex? It's your mother. Hi, Mom. I know. How are you? I don't know, she admitted, and that honesty was so startling it threw me off balance. I've been thinking a lot, about everything, about your grandmother's letter. She paused, and I could hear the faint, shaky intake of her breath. She was right, Alex. We were so proud of the things we could show off, the grades, the awards, the job title. We were so focused on the shiny surface of success that we never bothered to look at the foundation. We were blind, and I am so terribly sorry. For all of it. It wasn't a magic wand. It didn't instantly erase 36 years of feeling like an afterthought. But it was real. It was a crack of light under a door that had been bolted for my entire life. We didn't talk for long, but it was the most genuine conversation we had ever had. We started talking once a week after that. The calls were awkward at first, full of long pauses as we navigated the minefield of our shared past. But slowly, painstakingly, we began to build a small, fragile bridge toward some kind of new relationship. My father, Mark, was another story entirely. He retreated into a fortress of wounded pride. He didn't call. He didn't text. When my mother would put him on the phone, his answers were clipped, monosyllabic. The shock of that night hadn't humbled him. It had infuriated him. In his black and white world, I had broken the rules. I had not only become more successful than his golden child, but I had done so in a way he didn't understand or respect. And then, I had held up a mirror to the whole family, exposing the rot he had refused to see. His pride was a wall, and for a long, long time it seemed insurmountable. James, as promised, vanished. He did exactly as he was told. Mr. Harrison oversaw the liquidation of his assets. The flashy condo in the city, the ostentatious sports car, the small portfolio of stocks he liked to brag about. All of it was sold. The bill at Sapphire Summit was paid in full. A generous compensation was given to Kevin, the young reservations agent. And then James was gone. No forwarding address. No phone calls. He had been erased from the life he knew. For 6 months there was nothing. Then, a postcard showed up at my office. It was a cheap, flimsy card with a faded picture of a rocky, windswept coastline in Oregon. I turned it over. The handwriting was messy but unmistakably his. "Hey Alex," it read. "It's beautiful out here. Different. Quiet. I got a job. I'm the assistant manager at a small seaside inn. The owner is a tough old woman who reminds me a little of Grandma. The work is hard. The pay is terrible. I spend most of my time fixing leaky pipes and dealing with customer complaints." There was a small, smudged ink spot on the card, as if he had paused for a long time, thinking about what to write next. For the first time in my life, I think I understand what she meant about building something. "Hope you're well, James." I stood in my office, high above the city, holding that cheap piece of cardboard. There was no apology in it, not in words. But the entire postcard was an apology. He wasn't working to pay me back. He wasn't performing for an audience. He was just working. He was starting over from zero with nothing but his own 2 hands. He was finally trying to build something real. A wave of profound, unexpected relief washed over me. The ghost of our rivalry had finally been laid to rest. My own life, in stark contrast, was moving forward at lightning speed. The threat of Sterling's hostile takeover had evaporated. My quiet week off the grid had been the final strategic move we needed. Our legal team had solidified the shareholder support, and Sterling had withdrawn his bid, moving on to easier prey. I was free. Olivia and I were a whirlwind of creative energy. We scouted new properties. We debated designs over late-night dinners. We planned the future of Parker Hospitality with a shared passion that was intoxicating. Our love had been forged in the crucible of business, but now it was simply our life. One evening, as we sat on our balcony, sketching out ideas for a new eco-resort, I looked at her and knew, with absolute certainty, what I wanted. "Marry me, Liv," I said. She looked up from her sketchbook, a slow, beautiful smile spreading across her face. "Took you long enough, Parker," she said. We decided to have a small ceremony. Not at the grand, imposing Sapphire Summit, but at the Willow, the first little hotel I ever bought. The place where I had stood in freezing water and found my resolve. Felt right. Felt like bringing things full circle. A few weeks later, as we were drafting the guest list, Olivia looked at me, her expression serious. "What about your father? Are you going to invite him?" I hesitated, the pen hovering over the paper. The silence from him had been a constant, low-grade ache. The wounded child inside me, the boy who had spent a lifetime craving his approval, wanted to strike back, to exclude him just as he had been excluded. But then I looked across our living room, at the old cherrywood box sitting proudly on our mantel. I thought about my grandmother's wisdom. I thought about a conversation I'd had with Olivia late one night, when I was wrestling with the anger I still felt. "It's like you need to divorce yourself from the expectation of who he should be," she had said gently, "and just accept who he is." She was right. I was no longer that kid. I was a man building my own family, my own world, on my own terms. My happiness was no longer contingent on his approval. "Yes," I said, my voice firm with a newfound clarity. I'm going to invite him. I'll invite my mother, and I'll send an invitation to the inn in Oregon for James. I looked at Olivia, my partner, my equal, the co-architect of my life. Whether any of them choose to show up, that's their decision. It's out of my hands. But my door will be open. My house has many rooms. There's a place for them if they want it. As I wrote their names on the invitations, I felt a final, heavy chain fall away. I wasn't sending them out of obligation, or hope, or anger. I was sending them out because I was free. Free from the past. Free to choose. Free to build whatever future I wanted. Our wedding day was bathed in the soft, golden light of a late autumn afternoon. It was perfect, not because of any grand extravagance, but because of its profound, simple reality. We held the ceremony in the courtyard of the Willow, my first hotel, the place where my dream had survived its first real test. The ancient willow tree that gave the inn its name stood as our silent, leafy witness, its branches strung with hundreds of tiny, warm fairy lights. The air smelled of wood smoke, fallen leaves, and the sweet promise of a new beginning. Our guest list was small and intimate, a curated collection of the people who had built this life with us. Olivia's warm, laughing family, my closest friends who had been there through the lean years, and my most trusted colleagues, led by Marcus, his usually gruff face softened by a proud smile as he stood by my side as my best man. My mother, Emma, was there. She looked happier and more at peace than I had ever seen her. When she hugged me before the ceremony, her embrace was solid, grounding, and real. "I am so proud of the man you are, Alex," she whispered, and for the first time, I knew she meant the man, not the CEO. My cousin Rachel was there too, vibrant and full of energy, now a rising star in our marketing department, her future a bright, open road. To my genuine surprise, James came. He drove up from Oregon, looking thinner and weathered by the coastal winds, but his eyes were clear and steady. The restless, arrogant energy was gone, replaced by a quiet, self-contained humility. He didn't try to work the room or command attention. He found a seat in the back row and simply watched, a small, sincere smile on his face. After the ceremony, he approached me, not with a dramatic speech, but with a simple, firm handshake. "Congratulations, Alex," he said, looking from me to Olivia. "She's wonderful. You both look very happy." That was it, and it was more than enough. The biggest surprise, however, was my father. He came. He drove himself, arriving just as the ceremony was about to begin. He stood at the very back of the assembled guests, looking awkward and out of place in his formal, dark suit, a solitary figure on the edge of our circle of joy. Throughout the ceremony and the reception that followed, he kept his distance, a silent observer. I saw him speaking briefly with my mother, his expression unreadable. I made a conscious choice not to push him, not to force an interaction. I had extended the invitation. The next move had to be his. Just as the party was beginning to wind down, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the fairy lights glowed with a magical intensity, he made his move. He walked toward me, his steps hesitant. He was holding a small, awkwardly wrapped gift in his hands. He stopped in front of me, and for the first time in my life, I saw him not as the towering, judgmental patriarch of my childhood, but as he was, an old man, wrestling with the heavy weight of his own pride and a lifetime of mistaken beliefs. He wouldn't quite look me in the eye. His gaze was fixed on a point just over my shoulder. "Alex," he began, his voice rough with an emotion he couldn't name. He cleared his throat. "Your grandmother, what she wrote in that letter, she was right about you, and I was wrong." He pushed the small gift into my hands. His were trembling slightly. I'm proud of you." The words were clumsy, decades late. They didn't magically heal every old wound or erase every harsh memory. But hearing them, finally, wasn't the earth-shattering, life-affirming moment of validation I had once spent a lifetime dreaming about. The real validation, I realized, had already happened. It had happened when I read my grandmother's letter. It had happened when I built my company from the ground up. It had happened when I fell in love with Olivia. It had happened when I finally found peace within myself. These words from my father were something different. They weren't the closing of a circle. They were the opening of a door, just a crack. They were a single, tentative step onto a long, uncertain road toward a new kind of relationship. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw the immense effort it had cost him to say those words. I simply nodded. "Thank you, Dad," I said. For a brief, fleeting second, he met my gaze, and I saw a flicker of profound relief in his eyes. Then, as if the effort was too much, he gave a curt nod, turned, and walked away to rejoin my mother. I stood there in the magical twilight, holding the small, lumpy gift, with Olivia's warm hand in mine. I looked around at the twinkling lights, at the smiling faces of the people who truly saw and loved me, at the first real home I had ever built. My house, filled with light and laughter. My family, forged not by the obligations of blood, but by the deliberate choices of love, respect, and a shared future. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that I was finally, truly, and completely home. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Family is a complicated, messy, and beautiful thing, and finding your own value within it, or sometimes outside of it, is a journey we all face in one way or another. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt completely misunderstood by the people who were supposed to know you best? I'd love to hear about it. Please share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.